Ty, we're just going. We're just
going live?
We're just going live.
Wow.
Why not?
Why not get started in a little bit of a hurry?
Here. I'm gonna give you that count in. Okay, you ready?
Okay, go ahead.
This will make it easier for audio. Here we go.
Okay, do it.
3, 2.
Dan Rubenstein. It is Halloween weekend. We've got a full moon. We've got a lot to discuss here as college football week 9 just about in the books. We have games that are still underway. We had a very bizarre fake field goal by Oregon State that ran out the clock on the second quarter with Arizona getting the ball to start the second half in a tie football game. We can talk about that later on in the show, sir. How you doing tonight?
I'm great, Ty. It was a wonderful day of craziness in college football across this great land. A crazy couple. I mean, we had Friday, Thursday action that was great. Few big teams not play. A few big teams play but not finish games. It was great, Ty. I have nothing but, like, my Yelp review is 5 out of 5 stars for week 9.
Yeah, it was. Look, as we were discussing here before we hit the record button, there's a lot to get through tonight.
Yes.
There's a lot of things.
It's heavy. It's heavy. It's a Vegas buffet of college football information.
We have an awful lot to get through. Welcome on into the Campfire. I am Ty. He is Dan. Hope you enjoyed your weekend. Over the next hour or so, we're going to take you through all the action in college football week 9, the highs, the lows, the fire starters, the roasts, the scary stories. And of course, we're going to play your reverbs a little bit later on in the episode. Shall we start with our fire starters, Dan?
Let's.
I love that sound.
Of course, Castaway, yes?
Love it.
It's the best.
When I found that, I knew it was perfect for this segment.
I love the crackling, Ty. I love it. You know I do.
The big fire starter, the big story of the week was Kansas knocking off Oklahoma.
Yes.
Kansas knocked off Oklahoma 38-33. It was a dreary day in Lawrence, Kansas. It was cold and windy and rainy. There was a weather delay. And it was one of those games where you had like a total of 6 turnovers. Each team had 3. And, you know, a lot to discuss here in terms of what went wrong, I think, on the Oklahoma side, and some of what went wrong, and even some of what went right on the Kansas side. Of course, they win the football game. But for me, just in terms of watchability on a day where we had a bunch of interesting matchups, this one ruled the roost. This was like the most watchable game of the day. It was earlier in the day when everybody was still younger and full of life. And it lasted deep into like our live stream that we did, our watch along for the Oregon-Utah game because of that weather delay. So it really had like center stage for a good chunk of the afternoon. And it definitely delivered. Again, 38-33 Kansas with a big upset.
Yeah, this was a great game for shouting opinions about what coaches and quarterbacks should do to no one in particular. If you were watching this game alone or with a dog or with people that didn't care, hopefully you were watching this game with people who care about college football. But there was a lot of like, oh, you got to do this here. Oh, you can't do this here. You got to do this here. Oh, you can't throw it like that there. Oh, not like this, Jason Bean. Oh, like that, Jason Bean, though. Yeah. There was a lot. I spent a lot of time speaking to a wall, like a crazy person watching this game, and then speaking with you on our live stream. And so, right, it's Dylan Gabriel opening up the game with that pick 6. Oklahoma getting stripped near the goal line, but it was called forward progress stopped before the ball came out, which is, I mean, you can't review that. So that was a nice Oklahoma break. And then it was Kansas potentially scoring too soon and giving Oklahoma the ball. I yada like 4.5 quarters worth, even though that's technically not accurate. But there was a lot of fun in this game, and Oklahoma has had some close calls, namely what happened against UCF, certainly close call in a win against Texas, but a really impressive day from Kansas. It was great coaching. The crowd was great in bad weather. Devin Neal was great.
Did you see that
local kid made good?
Did you see that they tore down the goalposts and threw it in a nearby lake?
I did, of course. It's the only option, Ty. It's the only option.
Always the highlight of the afternoon. You know, for me, this game, I think, confirmed a lot of what I saw on paper on the Kansas side, and it also brought out some of what scared me about Oklahoma. So, like, for example, I called out a couple weeks ago now, before the Red River game, the tackle success rates of Oklahoma. I devoted like a whole week's worth of picks to tackle success rate, most of which was not successful because you know my luck with picking, if you've followed the show for any period of time. But tackle success rate, I had a bunch of Oklahoma people chime in, like nicely, just wondering like, where's that coming from? Because it seems like the defense is better, et cetera, et cetera. It is a subjective measure. I am not the one that is doing the numbers on that. It is something that I have seen and have access to, and I have been trying to follow throughout the course of the season. Oklahoma's defense on the whole, yes, is better, but going into that Red River game, and especially going into this game against Kansas, was pretty low in terms of the tackle success rate. And so that is the type of stat that you can mostly hide from, provided your offense is playing well, provided you're not shooting yourselves in the foot, provided you're not turning the ball over 3 times. But in instances such as this, it is one of those scenarios where it tends to come out. You can't always hide from it.
Right.
And if you watch this game, I mean, I think Brock Heward even called it out in the broadcast in the first quarter, something like 5 missed tackles. There were a multitude of situations throughout the course of this one where it was like, can you please tackle the Kansas player?
Right. It was slippery in their defense. It was wet. The weather was inclement. Yeah.
But can you please tackle the Kansas guy and stop him from scoring the football? So that to me was frustrating on the Oklahoma side. They also had 11 penalties, also frustrating. 2 of 10 on third downs. Yuck. The 3 turnovers were costly. I mean, they just were. And the one in the beginning where Dylan Gabriel threw a pick 6, I guess off a tip ball, like it that really came back to haunt him because this was a 1-score game in the end. Again, something we saw on paper from Kansas, because Kansas, we did this Patreon Spotlight episode, Kansas creating more havoc plays. They're doing more to try and change the game from a defensive standpoint. Still not a great defense, not even a good defense, but they are doing more to make those plays. And this was a game where that definitely came out.
I really felt because of the way Oklahoma was running the ball, especially early, that there was going to be more available, or maybe not even more available, more taken down the field. Dylan Gabriel opted to largely, and I don't know if it was a weather thing. I don't know, if it was a mistrust in the ball through the air, because as people know who have watched Dylan Gabriel throw a football, he's a very good quarterback. He's very accurate. He does not have a big arm.
No.
And so I don't know if there was concern from him or what, mistrust from Jeff Lebby of throwing the ball downfield. But look, if Drake Stoops is your guy, you're probably not doing a ton downfield. I think he's a good third receiver for a really good team. But if he's your guy, then you got to figure out some stuff out creatively. And Oklahoma wasn't really taking shots. They had the big catch at the end to help set things up. But against this Kansas defense, I just figured there would be more in the way of play action down the field with all of the success Oklahoma had on the ground. Credit to Kansas for doing a fantastic job of keeping the Oklahoma offense in front of them. I think you mentioned it, but maybe you didn't. It was something like 2 of 9, 2 of 10 on third down.
Yeah, 2 of 10
for Oklahoma. So they got off the field, and that's a crucial step before you have actual great players, going 3 deep at every position. Figure out ways to get off the field by whatever strategy you can find. Get off the field, confuse quarterbacks, make tackles in the open field, get hands in passing lanes. And Kansas did a really nice job of that today, and that's winning football, and that's a sign of where Lance Leipold has brought this program to win a game like this.
In a very short amount of time. It's
kind
of wild.
For sure.
Statistically, if you go back and look at the stats for this one, I mean, statistically, it ended up being a very even, very back and forth game, which is, I think, what made it watchable. Credit to Jason Bean for shaking off 2 picks.
I was worried about, and then we talked about this, about late game Jason Bean.
Yeah,
that
not great.
And made it work. Absolutely made it work. And Kansas got that stop late.
Threw a really bad pick late and still was able to make it work. Look, on the Oklahoma side, they still have the Big 12 in front of them. Definitely take some steam out of their playoff hopes. I think their playoff hopes are dead after this. But it does not knock them out of any contention for the Big 12. The Big 12 is kind of thrown in a blender at the moment. And they're still atop that conference with only 1 conference loss. But it will get interesting down the stretch, notably next week when Bedlam happens.
There's I don't know how many teams you want to count. Maybe this is a conversation for another day's show. There's like 7 PFG teams in the Big 12. Pretty flipping good at this moment, right? Between Oklahoma, Texas, West Virginia, Iowa State, Oklahoma State the way that they've played lately, Kansas State the way that they've played lately. TCU is not one of the teams that fits that mark for me right now. But no, there's a number of teams. Obviously, Texas with a backup quarterback showed out really nicely. We're going to get all over the place, but like there's a lot of those teams in the Big 12 right now. It makes it a fascinating conference.
Couldn't agree more. All right,
Kansas.
Where do you want to go? Where do you want to go next, Dan?
Let's talk Oregon, Utah. Let's talk the stream game just because between two ranked opponents and I think meaningful. Yes?
Yeah, well, yeah. I think so. Yeah, it was the leader in our respective clubhouse here when you and I, in the build up to week 9, were trying to figure out, hey, what game should we live stream? What game do people want us to live stream?
Yeah.
And this is the one. It was a 6.5 point spread. I spent the first 20 minutes of the live stream trying to get our tech to work. And that's notable only because by the time I looked up, it was like 21-3.
21-6, yeah, somewhere in there, yeah.
Oregon. And it just felt like they just took it to them right away. Like, this was not a close game, Dan. They just destroyed them pretty much in every facet, with the exception of penalties. The only thing I could find where Oregon didn't beat Utah was penalties. And technically, in that sense, yes, they did beat them, although that's not a good thing. But Oregon wins by 29, 35-6. It could have been 109, Dan. I'm sure you have more detailed thoughts, being the Oregon aficionado that you are. I was just really struck by how big a gap it seemed there was between these two teams. You know, like, we spent a good amount of time the last few months power ranking the Pac-12 because we have maintained since the very beginning of the season that this is one of, if not the best conferences in college football. And we got some clarity when Washington beat Oregon as to the pecking order on that front. And I think we got a little bit more clarity, if not last week, but certainly this week, with what's going on with USC. But Utah knocked off USC a week ago. It really feels like Washington and Oregon are way up here. And the other teams in the conference, I guess Utah would be next among them.
No, I'd have Oregon State. Oregon State beat Utah 21-7, yeah.
Either way, right? Like, whoever is next in your pecking order, our Verballer top 12 had Utah above Oregon State.
Yeah.
Whoever your team is that you would pick to be third in the conference, it's a really big gap between probably Oregon and them. And that was apparent in this game.
Okay, so this game specifically, Oregon's a way better college football team than Utah. And the spread indicated that there was confidence that that would be true with that kind of line and with how infrequently Utah loses at home in Salt Lake City. This was right from the jump. Oregon ran the ball. They threw the ball downfield. Bo Nix was checking boxes that I think a lot of Oregon fans were anxious or eager to see him check. That's throwing down the middle of the field. That's using his legs on 3rd and 3. Just get a first down. Use your legs. Just keep the drive going. Let's not overthink this. Let's just get to the chains and live to see another 1st and 10. He went downfield nicely. There was a bad drop, but whatever the case, he was really, really good. He looks like he started 55 college football games at quarterback. Bucky Irving, very good. The tight end, Terrence Ferguson, very good. You're right about the penalties. Some of that came on offensive line, false starts, and just not understanding cadence and being on the road once again. Story here for Oregon is still, to me, the offense, even though the defense was great. I just had fewer questions about the defense coming in, and I think we've all seen some of the lowlights of the Utah offense. They did the one thing that you have to do to beat Utah, and you have to tackle on the edge as Utah tries to run the ball, and they forced Bryson Barnes into obvious passing situations, and Utah's not going to beat good teams if Bryson Barnes has to complete passes on 3rd and 8. Doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback, doesn't mean it's a bad story. This is just a different level than USC's defense. It's a different level than Cal's defense. Luckily, we get to talk about those two teams playing each other, and it went exactly how you think it went.
50-49, yeah.
50-49. Oregon is set up really nicely. I actually, look, it could be proven wrong if they play in Vegas in a rematch. I think Oregon's better than Washington. Washington struggled with Stanford. Washington struggled with Arizona State. Maybe Oregon just broke Washington in a losing effort. I don't know what's going on with the Huskies right now. They're a very good team. As for the Pac-12 tiers or whatever, I think that's right. I think Oregon and Washington are ahead above, and then there's just like a mass of Utah and UCLA and Oregon State and who knows who else. Maybe that's it. So really nice. I think Oregon's playing like one of the best 3 teams in the country right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get playoff rankings, I believe, this coming week.
Mm-hmm.
And the first batch of playoff rankings, none of them really mean anything, but especially the first batch means basically next to nothing.
Right.
You have to put 2 Pac-12 teams in that conversation. You have to put Oregon and Washington in that conversation. You just have to. They played basically to a draw. Oregon's got a loss, but you saw what Oregon did against a very good Utah team.
Yeah.
And we've talked so much over the years about how the Pac-12 cannibalizes itself. It very much does the Big 12 thing where they all beat each other. Even if that happens this year, you got to put a Pac-12 team in.
Yeah.
You got to put Oregon or Washington in because, at least in my view,
a 12-1 champion. Yeah.
Got to put them in.
Yeah.
Got to put them in. Let's go to the SEC. Georgia 43, Florida 20, man.
Okay. So here's some breaking news. Carson Beck's really good.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was my takeaway from this game, to be honest with you, because we have seen 2 instances in particular where Kirby Smart gave Carson Beck the ball and handed him a little bit more responsibility to win the game, right? Because Georgia does not need to do that. Georgia can run the football effectively. They can beat you a multitude of different ways. They can beat you with just defense if they really want to. But there are 2 instances that come to mind. One was the Kentucky game, and the other was this game today, the cocktail party against Florida, where they essentially gave the ball to Carson Beck and said, go do what you do. And in both cases, I think we underestimated how good he was. The first time around, because we hadn't really seen a game like that out of him, the Kentucky game. And this time around, because Brock Bowers was out of the lineup, because he's hurt. And in both instances, he far exceeded expectations. 315 yards passing, 19 of 28, 2 touchdowns. We have not seen him flustered this season. He does not get flustered. Maybe he will in the remainder of Georgia's regular season schedule. They've still got Mizzou. They've got Ole Miss. They've got a game on the road at Tennessee. Maybe we will see it then.
Mm-hmm.
We did not see it today. And this was arguably, the biggest game on the schedule. It's certainly the biggest rivalry on the schedule. Even after Florida scored first, Florida's opening drive, very good.
Yeah.
Georgia scores 36 straight points before Florida scores again, not until the 4th quarter. I think the concerns about Brock Bowers being out of the lineup, I think the concerns about Georgia having to win with their quarterback and not with some of the usual suspects, all of those concerns were greatly exaggerated going into this game. And now, knowing what we know, it kind of makes us all feel silly.
Find Ladd McConkey. That's a really nice first step. And the thing that impressed me specifically about Carson Beck is Florida sent a lot of pressure at him. And there were times where he certainly heard footsteps, and you couldn't tell. That he would step in, especially down the middle of the field. He seemed fearless. They didn't have him throw a ton. Mike Bobo didn't have him throw a ton. Dejon Edwards ran really well. The defense started mixing up pressures. They started tackling really well in the open field. Some questionable, 4th down type calls for Florida in big moments. And I thought Graham Mertz was mostly fine. I just don't think he's a good enough quarterback to beat Georgia. And here's more breaking news. Very few are. So I have been proven wrong by what I think has been his growth this year. I just don't think Florida is on the level to beat Georgia. I don't think they have the weapons. I don't think they have the lines. And maybe they'll get there. The recruiting seems to be going in absolutely the correct direction. And they have a quarterback of the future. But no, this was a Georgia team that played. It seemed to play with more of your Tom Hanks castaway fire under their helmets. And it showed. They were not ready to cede an inch to Florida in this rivalry. And Ladd McConkey, changing directions on a dime. Was it Oscar Delp had a nice catch? They were making plays, and there are just too many ways still for Georgia to win, even if there isn't clear and obvious and experienced star power on both sides of the ball. They just have guys everywhere, and that's good enough for basically everybody in the SEC.
Yeah, while I was playing with the tech during the Oregon-Utah stream,
Yeah.
the same thing happened in the Georgia-Florida game as the Oregon-Utah game, in that when I finally looked up,
Right.
the game was out of hand.
Yeah.
It was out of hand. How did it get here so quickly? Georgia just made quick work. I don't know what else to say. They were really impressive.
There was just a calm to Carson Beck that I don't think you can get until you have 5, 6, 7, 8 games starting under your belts, and you're starting to see. I didn't think he was like yippy or jumpy at all, but it just takes time to get used to playing at this level. And I think especially, what was it? I think Dominic Lovett, the Mizzou transfer receiver, was making plays. He's just going to get into a rhythm more and more, and that's scary for everybody.
He's been in the system for a couple years. He didn't transfer, so he's very familiar with what they're trying to do, certainly the support staff around him. And I was just really impressed by, he didn't get flustered. You look at his presence in the pocket. He looks like a pro quarterback in the pocket. I mean, he's got a really good feel for where his protection is. He's got a good feel for where the pressure's coming from, and it seems to know where to go with the football very quickly. I suppose it's easier when you're playing on Georgia, but nonetheless, that level of poise, despite some of our concerns about whether or not Georgia with a new starting quarterback could get the job done in the same way as the old starting quarterback who was there for an eternity, I think we kind of have our answer. It could get tougher over the next couple weeks. I suspect it will, but I'm not sure if it's really going to show on the Georgia side because they just seem like they're almost impervious to it at this point.
All right, enough talking about impressive, great quarterback play. It's time to talk Ohio State, Wisconsin.
Shall we talk Ohio State, Wisconsin, Dan?
Yeah,
I actually have them as part of my warm fuzzies, if I could.
Oh, okay,
Should we get to the next segment?
Let's do it.
As we nestle around the campfire, this is when we say nice things about teams and players and coaches and maybe each other, as one does around the emotional experience that is a campfire. Ohio State had one of the featured matchups in week 9. They were a 14.5-point favorite over Wisconsin. Ohio State did not play its best game. And I feel like we've said that before, but they did not play.
Have they played its best game this year?
Probably not.
Okay.
You still feel like there is a lot more in the tank.
Okay.
On the Ohio State side.
Yeah.
They turned it over 3 times, but again, they get enough out of their defense, which is really good. They only allow 259 yards. They lean on Marvin Harrison Jr., who's a freak and really good. Had 2 touchdowns.
They're just like running the plays they ran against Penn State, and it worked again. Yeah.
It worked again. And Travion Henderson was back, which is good. And between the collective talents of those 2 guys on offense, they were basically able to pull away from Wisconsin and win 24-10. Now, depending on when you got the line, you may or may not have hit your Wisconsin bet. Again, in some places it was 14.5, and others it was 14. But this was a game that was pretty close late. It was pretty close late. There was the long run at the end that sprung Ohio State and gave them the 2-score lead and put this one on ice. Wisconsin has an injury, Braylon Allen. We will find out more about that one, I suspect, over the next couple days, but that would be a bummer for the offense. The offense as a whole is kind of a rough watch. Is that fair to say?
I'd say so.
I know this is the warm fuzzy segment, and we're supposed to be like...
So give me something... I think the warm fuzzy from this game specifically is Ohio State running the ball. Travion Henderson bursting through lanes and looking like the running back Buckeye fans miss dearly, right?
Can I tell you? I'll tell you what the warm fuzzy is.
Yeah.
The warm fuzzy is this, and this is speaking as a Penn State alum.
Okay.
This is speaking as a Notre Dame fan. This is speaking as just a fan of college football who is frustrated week in and week out when the teams that are out there can't figure out a way to get the balls to their best players.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State does not have that problem. Okay, they may have had that problem early as Kyle McCord was growing into the role, but what you're seeing happen is they just throw the damn ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. and he catches it pretty much wherever he is on the field. Now they've got Trey Henderson back, right? We've seen Chip Trainham have a pretty good run. Mayan Williams, we've seen him have a good run as well. Ohio State is very good at getting the best players on the offense the football, and would you believe it? That's why they keep winning. That's why they keep winning. The defense is very solid, but it's their best players making big plays on offense that gets them enough separation. I still would like to see them blow out a team like Wisconsin by 50 points. I feel like they're good enough to do it. I'm not entirely sure why they haven't.
Right.
But that aside, you'll take the win, and they're still undefeated.
Yeah, I also feel like Kyle McCord, if he's the second best quarterback in the conference behind J.J. McCarthy, would be like the 11th best quarterback in this conference in most other years. It's just the Big Ten is a terrible, terrible conference overall offensively. Yeah, the big thing in this game to me was Ohio State not playing particularly sharply, but eventually, I mean, I thought Wisconsin at home, I used the phrase like fire under their helmets for Georgia. I thought the defense came to play. Like there's only so much anybody can do against Marvin Harrison Jr. and some of the weapons on this offense. And it was nice to see Denzel Burke back on this Ohio State defense. But I thought the effort and the forcing of the turnovers and being in the right place when Kyle McCord inexplicably decides to throw the ball into the end zone as he's falling out of bounds. Like, you know that any quarterback who is throwing that ball, you know that is ending poorly. You just know it is. When they throw it 2.5 seconds too late, you're like, nope, you know this isn't going well. And it didn't. But the fact remains that I think that's a warm fuzzy for me is Wisconsin, in knowing that they weren't going to be able to generate a ton on offense, that the defense really did play out of its mind for a good chunk of this game.
Yeah, Ohio State, man. Ohio State keeps rolling. The point totals probably aren't as high as you are accustomed to with the Buckeyes, but they've been really solid on defense.
They're something like defense. 1-7 against like hitting the over this year.
Yeah.
So.
Also in the Big Ten,
warm fuzzy.
Northwestern, baby.
Yeah, buddy.
Northwestern. Let's talk about the Cats. The Cats are 4-4. They beat Maryland today. Brendan Sullivan got his third straight start for the injured Ben Bryant and was really good. He was really good. They've got a lot of work to do there, Northwestern.
Yeah.
But Northwestern has a legit shot of going to a bowl game. And I'm not sure they get to 6-6, but the fact that we are going to be going into week 10 and they're in a spot where they're 4-4 is a hell of a story. That's a hell of a story that nobody is talking about. And when I realized it, I'm like, I have to mention this when we talk about Big Ten warm fuzzies, because frankly, that is not a story that many people saw coming.
Right. Not at all. And I saw the graphic that was like, the last time Northwestern scored 20 plus points in the first half against a Big Ten opponent. And in my head, I was hearing like the old Glenn Miller Notre Dame's like, oh my God, the Cats take the field. It's 1950. Like, that's what it felt like. Really good win. And I suppose it's not September anymore, Terps.
No.
Suppose it's not.
Give
so
me a
yeah,
warm
the story
fuzzy
there.
on your end.
More warm fuzzies for me.
Yeah.
You want Pac-12 warm fuzzies? You want SEC warm fuzzies? Where are we going?
Tell me.
All right, let's go. Okay, I have already said Oregon, everything. UCLA's defense. UCLA's offense turned the ball over 4 times, and they still comfortably beat Colorado, and we're all over Shedeur Sanders. That was really nice to see from UCLA's defense as they occupy a sort of gray area among good but not great teams in the Pac-12. It was their homecoming. They were wearing the throwback jerseys. Very literally cool to see. I'm going to save my Rocky Lombardi picture show with USC Cal for most of that, but Marshawn Lloyd is quietly putting together a really impressive season for USC. So credit where it's due. USC has run the ball really well. South Carolina transfer Marshawn Lloyd has hit lanes hard and has been very good as a home run hitter for this USC offense.
He was like the yellow car in RC Pro-Am on that long touchdown run at the end. He just like found an entirely different gear that I don't think I've seen anybody hit so far this season, and blew the Cal defense away.
Yes.
Incredible.
And so did Jaden Ott, by the way, for Cal with his unorthodox running style. He runs high, and I like it. It's very fun to watch, and Cal always wears the throwback, so I'll appreciate that as a warm fuzzy when they play against USC. Also in the Pac-12, Stanford showed a ton of fight at home. Again, it was Alec Aomanor who went off against the Washington defense, and we'll save a Rocky Lombardi or whatever for another part of the Stanford game. And Washington looked good. Michael Penix again looked good. A little sloppier, but I mean, they have a very specific offense, and it was lightning against Stanford. How about ASU taking care of business, Ty? I think we both took the Sun Devils here.
We did.
ASU taking care of business against Wazoo, the Cougs' second straight road game. It was near the end of the game. I don't have the final number, but it was something like 8 tackles for a loss from ASU. They were hounding Wazoo, and They were getting off the field. It was a balance. Trenton Bourguet was really, really good going downfield. Cam Scadaboo once again. Elijah Badger. This is not what ASU is going to look like next year in the Big 12 and a couple years in the Big 12. And Kenny Dillingham is absolutely a master chopped chef right now. With what he is working with at ASU, between the transfers and injuries, to come away with a win like that, to me, easily the best 2-win team in the country. Not even a question. So that gives me a warm fuzzy for ASU.
Wow.
I don't know if you want me to go directly to the SEC right now, or do you want to go more Big 10 warm fuzzies? How are you feeling?
Well, I want to talk about the Big 12.
Okay, Big 12.
And I'm just going to group the Big 12 together into one long paragraph here, because the Big 12 had two groups of teams. They had teams taking care of business, which, as we've said on this show, is underrated. And then we had Oklahoma, which lost. But the biggest upset of the weekend, of course, we already talked about that one. But the rest of the games were kind of a thumping. We had K-State shut out Houston 41-0.
Yeah.
Iowa State sort of sat on Baylor. I
PXC?
texted a little bit with our friend Peter Pope about that game, and he had some choice words about Baylor. But Iowa State has found its way after a bit of a rocky start, and they've looked pretty good. West Virginia had a really impressive performance on the ground. West Virginia, to me, might be the warm fuzzy of the year, because after an entire offseason of doubting Neil Brown, of him being the number one name on the hot seat, of people dogging him because all he ever says in the offseason is, well, we got to make more changes, it seems like the plan might have worked this time around, because coming into the year, they only had basically two strengths. One was offensive line. The other was running back.
Mm-hmm.
And they built the entire plane out of it, and they've been very good at doing it. They've been very, very good at doing it. So West Virginia gets a win over UCF. That was a game that, frankly, I think I was all in on UCF. I still was not taking West Virginia seriously. That was a really nice win.
Garrett Green in and out, hurt, beat up, coming back, really strong.
Had 3 touchdowns on the ground. Yeah, I mean, just a really strong effort from West Virginia. And far be it from me to leave my Oklahoma State Pokes out of the party, baby.
That's true.
Oklahoma State, they ran away and hid from Cincinnati.
Who's not good.
Who's not good, I say.
Yeah.
Cincinnati's the worst team in the Big 12.
Yeah.
But the fact that Oklahoma State looked as impressive as another big game for Ollie Gordon, something clicked after their bye week. I am not fully expecting them to beat Oklahoma this coming week when the game is in Stillwater, the Bedlam game.
Right.
I do think this was the last good opportunity you had to bet on Oklahoma State. That's why I made it one of my picks. But that game next week is going to be really important in the Big 12, because Oklahoma State now is working its way up the standings because they've been on a bit of a tear here. So kudos to them. And last but certainly not least, like Texas.
Yes.
Texas was dominant. Texas was dominant with its defense and with Jonathan Brooks on the ground. A lot of the pregame narrative was around Malik Murphy getting the start. Malik Murphy was fine.
Yeah.
I honestly thought we would get more out of him, but it was his first start. We'll have to wait and see on the health of Quinn Ewers, if he can go next week. I believe they've got a big game against K-State. That will obviously influence the line in a pretty significant way. But for real, Texas and the way that they are playing defense now, all too often the conversation around Texas was they're soft. They're soft on defense. They're not tackling. They're not doing the basics that well. This defense is different. It's taken a little bit for Sark maybe to get his mentality in there among the locker room. I don't know what it is, but it seems like the guys that he's got there now are playing a style of football that is more physically imposing. And that is having a pretty big impact.
Yeah, you mentioned the Kansas State game. That's going to be a challenge. The defense is likely, I don't know if they're going to have to win that game, but they're going to have to show up in a big way. And beyond that, they're not going to need a ton from their defense. Against TCU with a beat-up offense, Iowa State's offense, they could lose to Iowa State, but it's not going to be because Iowa State and Rocco Becht are bombing it down the field.
That's right.
And same goes for Texas Tech and how beat up they are. So it's a great place to be for a potential Big 12 championship if they end up there, for a big bowl game, a playoff matchup, whatever. But yeah, they're built really, really well.
What do you got in the SEC?
Oh, I got a lot of warm fuzzies. Can we just start with Dylan Sampson for Tennessee?
Yeah.
Here's what I wrote down for Dylan Sampson under warm fuzzies. A lot of fun wiggle. I'm uncomfortable saying it, but I'm saying it still. I love guys like that, where it's just like, ooh, he's more coordinated than everybody trying to tackle him. Really fun to watch. Joe Milton had a pretty good game. I was just impressed by Tennessee on the road. That's a tough matchup against that Kentucky defense, against a Kentucky offense, which wasn't necessarily going downfield a ton, but you could sense that like Robinson and Dane Key and like guys were making plays, guys were getting open kind of underneath. Ray Davis was making plays both on the ground and through the air. That like it was a game that Tennessee could have easily lost. And I thought they were really well coached. They sat on that lead and they pulled it out. And there is something about just, again, taking care of business. And Tennessee closed really well. And Dylan Sampson with that fun wiggle was the highlight for me.
The fun wiggle. Anything
the fun
else
wiggle. That's what I
see?
wrote down. I have the big dudes from Texas A&M as warm fuzzies. They completely hounded South Carolina on both sides, to be clear. I thought the offensive line, which has been kind of struggly these past couple weeks, they did a nice job. And look, they should do a nice job at South Carolina, whatever, and their struggles up front. But they actually came through. I thought the inside of the line was, came through well enough. Max Johnson still took his hits, but that's always going to happen, even with like the 1995 Dallas Cowboys offensive line in front of Max Johnson. Anais Smith obviously is like Mr. Warm Fuzzy. He was making plays all over the place. And so Texas A&M, and there is like kind of like a factoid about Texas A&M that doesn't get me warm and fuzzy here. I don't think they've scored a second half offensive touchdown in 35 days. It's been a minute, Bob. It's been a minute. But otherwise, if we're all to agree that it all starts up front with, greetings from the Pollock family, Texas A&M took a step in the right direction on offense. They've already been showing it on defense, and they're getting healthier on defense too. So that was a warm fuzzy for me in their comfortable win.
South Carolina spent 60 minutes of hoping that Spencer Rattler wouldn't get called for intentional grounding. It was just a series of plays where he vaguely intentionally grounded.
Yes.
And he was running for his life the entire game. I think it was 10 tackles for loss, something of that nature, 4 sacks for the A&M defense. They were in the backfield all day.
Yeah. Otherwise, in the SEC, how about Peyton Thorne? Peyton Thorne played well. It's Mississippi State. It's really tough not to play well against Mississippi State with how bad Mississippi State's offense has been in sort of hanging its own defense out to dry. It was another Mikey Wright game as Will Rogers is still hurt, listed as week to week. But Peyton Thorne was accurate. Jarquez Hunter was predictably good because he is just a good player. But Peyton Thorne, they have not been able to throw the ball at all. Peyton Thorne was accurate, threw the ball well. That's a warm fuzzy if you're an Auburn fan it's been a minute since you've had a quarterback that has made you feel good. So a nice outing, a win is a win is a win. Good for Auburn.
Over in the ACC, if I can move,
please,
to the ACC, NC State beat Clemson.
At a certain point, we're not going to call it an upset, though, right?
I'm not even calling it an upset. I'm just
on the CW, especially.
The CW has had. You want to talk about the occult forces?
Yeah.
Of Halloween and the full moon. The CW has had some weird games this year.
Yes.
And NC State was 10-point dog against Clemson. Ends up winning 24-17. I love Kevin Concepcion.
Okay.
134 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was also the team's leading rusher with 51 yards on a long run. Clemson, Dan, not giving me the warm fuzzies. Decidedly not giving me the warm fuzzies.
No.
They are 4-4. It is entirely possible. We talked about this a little bit when we were doing the stream. It is entirely possible that Clemson misses a bowl game this year. I'm not saying it's likely.
Right. It's on the table.
It is on the table. They've got Notre Dame next week. Then Georgia Tech, who, we'll talk about Georgia Tech in a second. Georgia Tech beat UNC. They've got North Carolina as well. They've also got a road game against South Carolina to close out the year. South Carolina won that game a year ago. This is a version of Clemson that is not beating Notre Dame and is probably not beating North Carolina. The South Carolina game could be a toss-up. In effect, the Georgia Tech game is a must-win just to get to a damn bowl game.
And Georgia Tech is looking pretty good.
They're looking pretty good.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that in a second. It's just the offense has no juice It actually reminds me a lot of the Penn State offense. It's Penn State with more turnovers.
Great.
And in this one, there was a costly pick 6 in the third quarter off tip pass. Like, Will Shipley got hurt midway through the second quarter.
Give me the warm fuzzies, Ty. Give me the NC State warm fuzzies.
The NC State warm fuzzy is Kevin Concepcion.
Okay.
That's the warm fuzzy. The other warm fuzzy in the ACC, I have a couple of them, but the other big one is Haynes King.
Oh, man.
Haynes
he literally put people on his back and dragged them across first down markers to win this game. It was great.
It has taken him a little while to kind of find his way at Georgia Tech, but he's a gamer, man. He's a gamer. 377 in total yardage, 4 touchdowns, the big, huge home win over North Carolina. In many ways, we saw North Carolina, the old North Carolina defense, come back for an encore in this game. They gave up over 600 yards, including 250-ish on the ground in the fourth quarter to Georgia Tech. But in the end, it is a big play, not from Haynes King, but from the Georgia Tech defense. The Georgia Tech defense, the secondary in particular, that leveled Tez Walker when he caught a pass.
Saw that, yeah.
That would have set up perhaps a scoring drive that would have tilted the favor of this game in a much different direction. Tez Walker was down for a while. He kind of limped off. And so hopefully he is okay. It's been a rough go for him this season. But just like all due credit to Haynes King and Georgia Tech and Brent Key, and they play hard. They play hard. Maybe the record isn't where they would like it to be. They play hard. They play hard, and this was a pretty big win for them.
There's just a lot of growers right now in the ACC, right?
Big time.
Look, between Boston College, now NC State, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, by the way. How about that warm fuzzy from, I think it was Friday night?
Yeah.
Just absolutely demolishing Syracuse. Nothing warm and fuzzy about Syracuse right now. Miami held on. Come on, that's a warm fuzzy.
Well, we'll get to that's not a warm fuzzy. No.
They won a game.
We'll get to that later.
At home.
If you want to do warm fuzzies in the ACC, if you want to tack anything more on, let's tack on Florida State and Louisville.
Okay.
Let's tack them on because FSU throttled Wake and Louisville sat on Duke.
Ooh, yeah.
They sat on Duke. On the Florida State side, it was impressive because they were down a couple wide receivers, including Johnny Wilson. They didn't skip a beat. It was their 14th straight game, scoring more than 30 points. You look at their schedule, it's hard to find another loss. It's at Pitt, it's Miami, it's North Alabama.
Wait, hold on.
Florida.
Did Pitt keep it within 65 of Notre Dame?
They did keep it within 65 of Notre Dame.
Anything can happen, baby. Anything can happen.
Louisville seems like the team that Florida State's going to play in the ACC title game. They controlled the game with Duke on the ground with Jawar Jordan and defensively with their defense. They did a really good job. Duke ran exactly 0 plays in the red zone in this game, and they had just 202 yards on the day. And Louisville's in another advantageous spot with their schedule. Virginia Tech, Virginia, they're at Miami to close out their ACC schedule. So you feel pretty good about those two teams the rest
I don't want any part of Virginia Tech, baby. Come on. I'm saying baby a lot right now. I'm channeling my inner Vince Vaughn. Yeah, they're in a great spot. They're looking very solid. They look really well coached. They look like they've been together for 3 years rather than like 8 games. So Louisville's in a nice spot.
And the only other thing I want to call out is Jordan Newbin.
Yes.
For Minnesota. 40 carries, 204 yards. He's a third-string running back who's a converted safety and got the start because of some injuries and was the workhorse.
Yeah, it was Darius Taylor's been out for a while. Minnesota's been looking everywhere for offense. I saw, by the way, just on that topic, I think it was in the Cal game. Cal was running a back who the announcer said, he's not even on the depth chart. We don't see him in the roster. And I always appreciate when a guy like that just like, oh, I can find a lane running outside zone. Sure.
Yeah.
And that counts. So, yeah, ACC's been really fun.
Shall we get to the Rocky Lombardi horror show?
Can I do warm fuzzies from quickly like G5 teams?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Come on, Ty.
Yeah, no, do it.
No erasure here. Okay, UTSA, undefeated in the American. 4-0 after beating ECU, who isn't that good this year, but Frank Harris to Josh Cephas was very, very good. An awesome all-purpose effort for Blake Watson at Memphis. They went over North Texas, who has a fun offense and no defense. SMU was up 52-3 at the half against Tulsa.
We thought they were going to score 100.
That's a scalding fuzzy, Ty. That's not just a warm fuzzy. Tulane held on despite a big Rice comeback. That's nice. Keep winning, Tulane. They're fun. I like, all things Green Wave. Big Boise second half in their win over a Wyoming team that still has no offense, but still manages ways to win. Played both quarterbacks. Ginty got hurt early on, but they still won comfortably over Wyoming. New Mexico State, bowl eligible. Warm fuzzy there. 4 straight wins for the first time since 2002 for Jerry Kill and New Mexico State. Liberty still undefeated with a comfortable win over Western Kentucky. Rich Rod against Mike McIntyre, an old school Pac-12 matchup. Jacksonville State ran, and now they're 7-2 in their first season as an FBS team. And Georgia Southern over Georgia State. Modern day hate. The Eagles snap a 3-game losing streak to Georgia State. So nice win there. I think that was Thursday night as well.
And snow
at
Colorado
in
State.
Air Force, Colorado State. Yeah, there was a penalty for throwing snowballs, I want to say. It's the best. Also, super depressing to not even be in Halloween and have a snow game. Really, really took the wind out of me. But otherwise, always great TV, a snow game.
All right, let's do it. Let's get to scary stories, Darren.
Let's.
You got the sound?
Oh, I've got the sound.
It's your fault.
That's right. Crackle, crackle.
Let's talk about the Taylor Swift curse, Dan.
I think everything's okay with Taylor Swift by me. Tell me more.
We had a verballer, Samantha, send us a note that Purdue has been 0-9 on weeks where Taylor Swift has released an album.
And this counts as re-releases too, we're counting?
It just released an album.
Okay.
So yeah, technically. I have not verified this independently, but I don't know why anybody would make that up. It has to be true. It's so specific. It has to be true. And the question was, and this was like on Thursday, because Taylor is re-releasing 1989, does this mean that Purdue is going to lose to Nebraska? And I said, well, I don't know, but I would say definitely yes. And they did. That game was never close. Nebraska won. Purdue now 0-10, if you're to believe the stat, on weeks when Taylor Swift releases an album.
Damn.
Occult forces at play, Dan. Speaking of which, the occult forces of the universe may lead us down a very eerie path where we are talking about BC, Boston College.
Yeah.
Rhyming with 9 and 3.
The line to 9?
The line to 9 for Boston College is very weird, but very real.
Okay.
It is very real for Boston College. It is not a great team. They've gotten a lot out of Thomas Castellanos. It is not a great team.
No.
I emphasize again, it is not a good team.
But you would argue, they're building something.
They're doing something. I don't know what they're doing, but if they get the 9 wins, it'd be a hell of an effort.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
From Jeff Hafley. Also from me, Tyler Van Dyke.
Man.
Do you remember when we thought he was going to be the first overall draft pick?
It seems like a different time, Ty.
We were all young and full of life.
Uh-huh.
I was less gray. You probably had 0 children.
Probably, yeah.
Tyler Van Dyke has thrown 7 picks in his last 3 games. He is beat up, but this Miami offense continues to be in a very weird spot. They went to overtime against Virginia. They won 29-26, but they've got NC State, they've got Florida State, they've got Louisville, and the aforementioned Boston College Eagles, perhaps 9-3 Eagles, to close out their season. I don't know what Miami's final record ends up being, but it has definitely been a topsy-turvy year in which, again, like last year, we expected a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
I would give a quick shout out to Virginia because Virginia's playing hard. This is a third road game this season, I want to say, where they've had a double-digit lead and then blew it and ended up losing. But Virginia is definitely playing hard. Virginia is showing some progress, even if the wins aren't there yet. So good for them. Amid this roast, or amid this scary story, whatever section of the show we're in, kudos to Virginia. And my final scary story is one about the Penn State offense, Dan.
Yeah.
Penn State won 33-24, but it was close. This was a close football game. Indiana draws first blood. They get a 90-yard touchdown pass early. Then they get another 69-yard touchdown pass. They go up 14-7, something like that, to start the second quarter on like a horribly blown coverage. The guy, you or I could have walked in if we caught the pass. I'm watching this game in disbelief, and I've got my app up, and I'm looking at the DraftKings app.
Of course.
And I'm looking for how low can this live line go? And I was talking to you, and eventually I hit -9.5 Penn State. I'm thinking there is no way they can't cover this point spread. Penn State -9.5 against Indiana the rest of the way. They instantly go up 3 points. I'm thinking, no problem. This is going to be money in the bank. Lo and behold, end of the game, they're up 3. Brendan Sorsby from Indiana gets sacked. The ball shoots out of his hand, goes back into his own end zone. They're trying to jump on it in the end zone like it's a greased pig. They knock it out the back of the end zone for a safety and a 9-point win. And that, my friends, is how the hook gets you.
Yes.
Penn State -9.5 did not cover. And it really left a bad taste in my mouth. The offense for Penn State is still pretty bad. It got better, still pretty bad. We finally got to see Drew Aller make a big boy throw, which he did admirably.
I saw that at the end of the game.
At the end of the game, to Condre Lambert-Smith, the long touchdown. That was to give them the lead after the game was tied at 24-all. Not a stellar showing for Penn State. A lot more of what we've been griping about on this show. I am frankly still bitter about that 9.5-point live line, but I digress. What do you
Did you think it was a hangover, or did you think that this is just a team that week to week is not focused?
I don't know.
They showed that lack of focus, obviously, against Northwestern in the first half. Certainly, Ohio State's a much bigger animal than either Northwestern or Indiana. What's your read?
I don't think it's a focus thing. I don't think it's a hangover thing.
Okay.
I think it's a combination of receivers not being able to get open.
They're also giving up stuff on defense, though. Those big plays. They weren't giving up big plays before. Now they were against Indiana.
They gave up some big plays. That was probably a focus thing. But on offense, I think it's a combination of receivers that can't get open. I think it's some curious play calling. And I also think what we saw in this game, and I know for the most part, I've been saying it's receivers. We saw Drew Aller miss some guys. You could see it on the tape. There were guys open, sitting in pockets that he, either because he was feeling pressure or just wasn't seeing them. He wasn't delivering the ball on time where it was supposed to go. Has a hell of an arm, has a ton of promise. Hopefully they can develop him in a way that they haven't developed quarterbacks of the past. But the offense it's I don't know. It's suddenly not going to get better. Let's put it that way.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. What else you have?
That's it.
Those are your Rocky Lombardi picture show?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to belabor the USC defense right now. The USC defense, it wasn't just that they were bad. It was that this is a Cal third-string quarterback completing throws downfield, and Jaden Ott has been a good Pac-12 running back for a couple of years now. He was untouched, Ty. He was going down I-5 against this USC front over and over again. And so USC got out of this with a win. It's better to win 50-49, and they got away with like a defensive hold on the 2-point conversion Justin Wilcox ran to try to win this game, and that's fine. Win however you got to win. If the refs don't call it, it's fine. But it's going to get bad. Like, UCLA doesn't even have a good offense, and they made the quarterback change. They might just straight up beat USC by a couple of touchdowns like Notre Dame did. Oregon, in a couple of weeks, might limb from limb, your favorite phrase here, do just bad things to this USC defense. So, and that game's in Eugene. So that's pretty scary. Nothing new. It's a horror that we've seen in the past. Mississippi State, again, also nothing new, and not going to belabor the point given the circumstances, but just like a tough watch. It's just really tough that Mississippi State isn't competitive with all of the fun teams that they've had recently, either in the Mike Leach era, either in the Dan Mullen era, whatever. To just have them as a doormat doesn't feel right in the SEC, and they are right now.
Yeah, I mean, didn't Auburn have something like 300 yards in the first half?
Yes. No, they jumped on him right away.
They jumped on him right away, And Mississippi State on defense gave up a ton of big plays, and it's not an offense that's good enough at this point to exist in a world where it doesn't have a good defense.
Yeah.
They don't have the defense. The offense isn't going to bail them out.
Colorado's a tough watch. Colorado's a real tough watch on offense. Shedeur Sanders keeps getting hammered over and over. And UCLA has a good defense. They have absolute dudes. Leato is awesome coming off of the edge for UCLA, but just no protection for Colorado. And the fact that UCLA, I think, 2 different quarterbacks threw picks to Travis Hunter. UCLA lost the turnover battle. I think at one point it was 4-0 and comfortably won this game. Colorado is in very real danger of winning their first 3 and finishing 4-8. And you look at the schedule and just it's really hard to find. I mean, I guess depending on what Utah is doing, but Utah's going to run over this Colorado offense.
Yeah,
so,
the remaining schedule for the Buffaloes is Oregon State next week, Arizona the week after, and then 2 road games to close out the year at Wazoo and at Utah. That's not going to be easy for them.
No. Also, I don't know what happened with Washington. Like, Washington was on top of the world, game days there, and this isn't a horror show. I don't know if you saw the interception near the end of the game that it was a Rome Odunze, like catching it behind a Stanford player and then the Stanford player turning it and flipping it loose and intercepting it in the end zone. It's a great offense. It's super fun. They seem off with the Arizona State game and now with this game against Stanford. And Stanford's feisty, but like Stanford lost to Sac State a month ago, and Stanford's now going to be beating a top 5 team in the country. Stanford had an opportunity. This was the horror show for me. They called a perfect 4th and 2 play to continue a drive to beat Washington with a couple of minutes left.
And he dropped
kind of a reverse double pass situation. Guy was wide open 8 yards down the field, just dropped it.
Yeah, it was a little bit underthrown, but it was coming from a non-quarterback.
It was catchable. It was absolutely catchable in his fingers.
Catchable. Very, very catchable. Yeah,
that was tough.
That was a tough one.
Those are some horror stories for me.
Yeah, I mean, that Penn State line is just going to leave a really bad taste in my mouth, if I'm being honest with you, Dan.
Yeah?
It's just going to leave a really bad taste in my mouth, but I suppose I'm going to have to get over it here.
You'll get over it. I mean, look, everybody was celebrating the fact that Drew Aller made a great throw. So just don't bet on Penn State anymore if that's the conversation around Penn State's offense. Look, he made a throw. He finally made a throw.
He made a throw.
Yeah.
Shall we get to our roasts?
Absolutely.
We used to roast Stay Puft marshmallows by the fire at Camp Wakanda.
We had a couple come in on the reverb line. Our guy Shay was very selective, picking only the best to play. We shortened it a little bit so we have more time for our roasts this evening. We appreciate everybody who dialed in at 855-VERBAL-3. Here's what the fine Verballers had to say about Week 9. Have a listen.
Utah-Oregon was not a football game. That was a slasher film with no survivors. Absolutely terrifying. Happy Halloween.
Oh, Dan and Ty, it's the Jersey Jayhawk. You know what time it is. OU just got beamed. Rock chalk.
Dan, Ty, this is Patrick on Tybee Island. I'm at the Tybee Lighthouse. We're painting the whole state of Georgia red tonight because all them Gators are extinct. Go Dogs. Can't wait to go to the quarter.
It's been a long trek through the college football wilderness. But for the first time in 7 years, Nebraska has 5 wins before October's end.
And one of the great things about college football is you can look up and see Boston College. Yes, the Eagle is 5-3. You don't need to look up who they beat.
The Indiana Hoosiers taking over with the ball at their 20-yard line after interception, going run, run, run for 2 yards. Deserved everything that happened to them after that.
How do I talk to my children about the possibility of Northwestern representing the Big Ten West in the Big Ten championship game?
Have you talked to your kids about Big Ten West champion Minnesota Golden Gophers?
There are 3 things in life: death, taxes, and Tennessee owning Kentucky in football. Go Vols.
We should not fire Mike Locksley, but we should monitor that situation. He's lucky there were 5 games in September.
Is there anything spookier or scarier than Mario Cristobal in a close game?
Beautiful. Oh, what a great batch.
I think, well, Miami's sort of the new Boston College, right? They play exactly as competitive as everybody they play. Like, we're going to jump out to a lead against North Carolina. Don't ask us about the second half. We're going to go down to Virginia. Don't ask us, but we're going to win somehow, some way.
It's
That's
the
who they
worst
are.
kind of team to root for. You're a one-score game every single week. You're in for
Ty,
a one-score game.
You don't need to tell me. I experienced it for 4 very long, snowy, wintry years. You don't need to tell me. Do you have any roast, or would you like to turn the floor over to me?
Pitt got demolished.
Yeah, you haven't mentioned this. Continue.
Pitt got demolished. This is the one ACC game I didn't mention. Pitt got demolished by Notre Dame. They got absolutely demolished. We had this game on one of our quad boxes as we were doing the live stream, and it was not competitive. It just was really, really bad. Pitt had 5 turnovers, each one uglier than the last. They were 1 of 11 on third downs. They lost by 51 points to Notre Dame. After the game, Pat Narduzzi, quote, and this is the full quote. There were some abridged versions going around the web. The full quote was, quote, "I'll go back as a football coach. You lose a lot of good players from a year ago, and you think as a coach you're going to replace them, and obviously we haven't." Again, it starts with me. I didn't do a good enough job coaching today. Put it on me. We've got to make plays. So that was at least vaguely Pat Narduzzi throwing his team under the bus.
Yep.
And there was some reaction from other Pitt Panthers out on social media upon seeing that quote. Pat Narduzzi is a fiery guy. That's part of why we like him on the show. Yeah, the Nard Dog has given us hours of content to discuss, and a lot of what he has to say is right. He's just saying the quiet part out loud. And, you know, especially with his comments around the transfer portal and NIL and Lincoln Riley stealing his guy. Like that type of stuff is all, it adds to the fabric of college football.
Penn State's fake offense. Yeah.
Penn State's fake offense. It adds to the fabric of college football in a really interesting way. But don't throw your team under the bus, man. Like, I realize he shares the blame here. He acknowledges as much, but I don't know. I just felt like that was a really bad look. Frustration is natural, but I don't know. If you have beef with those guys, keep it inside the locker room.
Also, it's not unique to this year for Pitt. If you look at the past 5-6 years, they've had a good year on offense. And at a certain point, that's on your vision, that's on your hiring, that's on your recruiting rubric, whatever. They tend to average like 70s, 80s, 90s in terms of points per drive on offense. And so, look, nobody would throw the players under the bus faster than myself if I were head coach, because that's why I'm not a head coach. I would deflect as often as possible. But yeah, that sort of came to a head against Notre Dame. May I roast?
That's a really tough one. Yeah, go ahead.
Why is Rutgers the only likable story in the Big Ten this year? Why is Rutgers the single, now also Jordan Newman? That's likable. You know, a random Minnesota running back here and there becomes likable. But you look at the Big Ten this year, and it's such a garbage narrative conference right now. There are individual really nice storylines, specific players or coaches or whatever. But when you look at the teams, there's one clearly excellent team, and as soon as I say that it's Michigan, there will be a collective, yeah, but across this great land with everything that's going on. Ohio State has been disappointing and not a fun watch at all this year. Penn State, you've covered it pretty thoroughly.
Just move on.
Maryland.
You're better moving on.
Better moving on. Maryland has just lost consecutive games to Illinois and Northwestern as double-digit favorites. It would be irresponsible and full-on false of me to accuse Maryland of throwing games for financial gain. But if they were, this is what it would look like. This is what it would look like. Indiana's been terrible and an impossible offensive watch. Everybody knows what's going on with Michigan State, and it has been ugly on the field, 0-5 against the Big Ten. Minnesota has put forth, atop the Big Ten West, mind you, unwatchable offenses themselves. Iowa's well-trod territory, and they're not fully themselves because Deacon Hill's the quarterback, not Cade McNamara, but awful, awful situation, nepotism. Wisconsin's down there starting quarterback, and we're definitely entertaining with Tanner Mordecai. I guess Heinrich Harburg is entertaining for Nebraska, but
Double H.
They haven't done anything. Northwestern, Purdue, Illinois. Northwestern beat Minnesota. Now they've beaten Maryland, but it's hard to root for this year's version of Northwestern considering the baggage that they've come into the year with. I don't know how the Big Ten got here and maintains this place most years of having 10 fully unwatchable situations. And yet, once again, we're heading into November and the Big Ten is smiling its big, toothy, yellow, just gangrene-ridden mouth at all of us once again. That's all. Awful.
Tell us what you really think. Yeah. All right.
That's it. That's my roast.
Well, we appreciate everybody downloading this episode, supporting the Solid Verbal. If you've made it this far, we would encourage you to hit subscribe or follow. Going out to verballers.com. That's our Patreon, where, of course, you can find all the bonus perks like the Discord, which is a fun place to be every Saturday. Of course, you can also get access to the bonus episodes that we do on Thursdays, as well as ad-free episodes. We've got videos by Jeff Schwartz, our friend, who we post those every other Thursday or so, and talk about some of the schemes from the week that was or popular trends in college football to help you understand what the plays mean and how they look on video. That's at Verballers, VERBALLERS.com, Dan.
Yes.
The games are still going on.
What do we have?
As we speak, we've got Arizona and Oregon State in a close one.
Oh, Beavs up 4 in the fourth quarter.
Late. We've got Fresno State storming back in the third quarter to take the lead on UNLV. We've got Nevada playing as well. There are a couple games going on. We will update everybody on those when we do our next episode. But Dan, I think that's it for the campfire. If you want to throw the dirt or whatever on this thing.
There's my bamboo flute, saluting everybody for listening.
For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildebrand. Thanks for downloading, for listening, for supporting our show. We'll talk to you all soon. Stay solid.
Peace.